we can go to next speaker, and the next speaker is Mr. Ricardo Silva. Ricardo, please.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here. And my predecessors in this presentation have done an excellent job, which will make my presentation so much easier. So next slide, please. As my predecessors have said, population is aging. We're moving towards more non-communicable diseases, and this affects not only the regular individual, it also affects the health workforce. So health workforce is also aging. Next slide, please. Between the aging of the workforce and the fact that we do not have enough institutions and or people to fill in the vacancies, there is a shortage of health workforce worldwide. And this shortage, it's only going to expand. By 2030, it's expected to reach about 15 million deficit. And unless every single child on a country decides to go and work in healthcare, there's no way we can physically fill this gap. Next slide, please. So simultaneously, something that is happening is that we are in a revolution. We're in a technology revolution. We're in the fourth industrial revolution, and technology is ubiquitous. It's everywhere. And this has permeated to healthcare. In fact, last week, Hanson Robotics just deployed Grace, which is a specific healthcare robot, artificial intelligence, humanoid. She's the little sister of Sophia. And he has been created not only with the means to communicate with human beings, with a whole set of sensors that allow them to do so in a healthcare setting. He's being produced in Hong Kong, and it's going to be deployed both in Hong Kong and some parts of China. She speaks English, Cantonese, and Mandarin. Next slide, please. So, could every country in the world actually move into this fourth industrial revolution? Do we have the means, the tools, the access? Well, the answer is actually yes. The technology gap has been significantly reducing worldwide. If you see, most regions have a coverage of telephone that exceeds 50% of the population, and the machine-to-machine connections, in particular Internet of Medical Things, is significantly expanding. So pretty much everyone, Elliot did mention this, is going to have access to a connected medical device at a very small cost and high levels of accessibility. So how can we take all of this into the next step? Next slide, please. Luis mentioned how innovation in the time of COVID has increased. Elliot also mentioned the level 2 connected hospital. And Brazil has done an excellent job in demonstrating this. The Brazilian government actually took all of their different e-health initiatives into the same bucket, being able to deploy a next generation second stage digital hospital to all of the population. So governments have done a great deal. Next slide, please. Luis also mentioned innovation. Well, these 5 companies in Latin America today are worth over $100 million each. What they did, they've been in business for a long time, but they used their resources to move into this next generation of healthcare and actually used COVID as a tool to move forward with this innovation. Of course, they were already well positioned, but they took the advantage of the need of changing the way we did things in order to move to this next generation of digital connected care. Next slide, please. So what is the next step on this digital connected care? Is using artificial intelligence with all of these connected devices to improve the quality, accessibility, and affordability of healthcare. When we talk about artificial intelligence, essentially what we're talking about is building software that can mimic, imitate, or replicate part of what is assumed to be human intelligence. It is a very complex web of technologies, but I'm going to just touch into two aspects: predictive analytics and natural language processing. Next slide, please. So what is predictive analytics? Predictive analytics is taking information, is taking data, using this data for trend analysis, and using these trends to do something before a disease, a problem may actually arise. So by knowing what is the common development of an illness, by knowing what is the common obsolescence of a technology, we can use that knowledge, we can use the information, we can use the data and predict when that technology or that person is going to fail. Since we know when that is going to happen, then we can take action before it happens and avoid it going into failure. Something interesting is that a lot of the people who are working in predictive analytics worldwide are actually not from the United States, but we see some of the key players in India, in Israel, and many European countries. Next slide, please. So this technology, innovation, and predictive analytics would serve to reduce the cost of healthcare, will serve to improve outcomes, and will serve to assist this limited number of healthcare providers. What I'm telling you about healthcare providers also extends to clinical engineers and health technology assessment. So predictive analytics is a fundamental tool for health technology assessment. Next slide, please. So Luis talked about innovation. He didn't actually promote himself, so I'm going to do that for him. So Luis has built a wonderful system, and he's not only built the system, but you can actually deploy and download a free version of this system that can be used anywhere in the world. This system takes advantage of predictive and prescriptive technologies to provide an AI-assisted maintenance for medical devices. So if you want to glimpse what is AI impact in medical devices, then this is a good place to get started. Next slide, please. Now let's talk about natural language processing. And that's simply the ability of a computer system to communicate either verbally or written with human beings. This is very important because, again, when we're talking of a lack of human resources, the ability to communicate with a computer system becomes paramount. Not only a doctor can dictate to a system, and that reduces his use of the technology and increments time with a human-human interaction, but natural language processing is a key for those at-home patients that Elliot talked about. Those individuals that need some care support, that need to be coordinated, the fact that they could communicate to their Google Assist or Siri or whatever mobile device and get an answer to a healthcare need is paramount. So the fact that most of these digital assistants are actually learning how to understand and speak healthcare, it's important. But we need to properly guide the answer so that the answer is accurate and they can actually support the healthcare needs of a patient. So let's go to the next slide, please. So most of the people, and that is worldwide, will access IT system through their mobile device. Smartphones are by far the highest connectivity piece in the world. And also Android-based systems are leading worldwide. That is interesting because if we look at all of the different natural language processing, Google is the one that speaks the largest amount of languages. So Google Android speaks largest amount of languages and has the highest distribution. Now, does that mean that they speak all languages? Do they mean that they can communicate with everybody? Let's go to the next slide, please. The answer is not only they cannot communicate, but they're not necessarily doing it in the most ethical, accurate, and complete way. World Health Organization just published this beautiful document about ethics and governance for artificial intelligence in healthcare. And one thing they do very well is they actually set a group of principles for everyone in the field to follow. This is the time for innovation in healthcare. This is the time for AI, and this is the time for all of us to lend a hand so that we can move into the next step of healthcare. Next slide, and that's all for me. Thank you.
Well, Ricardo, thank you very much for a wonderful presentation. I must admit that I'm really impressed with all of those information which you presented and with all of those systems which are currently active. Congratulations once again, it was really, really good.